All right, Trevor, welcome to the show. I appreciate you taking the time to come on, man. How are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks. You caught me at a good time.
Yeah, no, like we were talking before, I appreciate you being flexible and getting on. So, for those who maybe don't know you or know what this is going to be about, why don't you dive in just a little bit about kind of who you are, maybe a little bit about your background, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure, yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks again for inviting me to chat. I'm what I would call kind of a sports performance coach. I see myself more of an engineer on the team within a golf team, sort of on the back end and working on sort of midterm, long-term plans. I'm a physio by trade, and so I look at things like biomechanics, 3D motion capture, force plate tech, and then I really strongly lean on the TPI system to help guide the team on, why and how a player is moving. And then from there, we can kind of script out, what a professional might be doing for the next 6 months to a year in conversation with the coach and the players. So really, I'm kind of a knowledge broker, if you will, for whether that's an avid amateur or a professional.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I actually want to jump in quite quickly. You mentioned TPI. That's something that I've been working, with someone here locally on, and we were talking about it, just before we jumped on, which was, being able to outswing bad mobility or movement patterns or mechanics. I was certainly in the camp of, for a long time, I thought that I was good enough to where, like, oh, it doesn't matter if I have T-spine issues or if I have, internal, external rotation issues or whatever else that is. And I found that is not the case. So I wanted to get your take on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clearly, I don't have to teach you anything about that. You kind of know already. Essentially, if you understand and you get a baseline of what your body is capable of doing, you can then sort of relay that to the coach. Like if you're coming to my office, for instance, you can relay that to the coach and say, look, like this person's going to really have a hard time hitting a high draw or a high cut or whatever based on some of the movements that they're capable of doing. And you can eliminate a lot of stress and a lot of headaches if you're trying to like teach a specific hand position, for instance, if someone's just not really capable. So some of the best players in the world sometimes are still kind of struggling with accepting that fact that, the hardware sometimes might not match what you're trying to do with your software, so to speak. And sometimes we can work on the hardware in the background, going through the screens, developing a game plan and a program, whether it's even off season or during season, to make the hardware a little bit easier to use for the software. So yeah, I can't say that enough. Like again, even some of the best players in the world are trying to groove sort of an old feel or an old swing look that doesn't necessarily make sense for where they are now. Because you can wake up every day and be completely, well, slightly different than you were yesterday just by sleeping funny. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough to how sort of standardizing some movement screens, test, retest over time is the most beneficial for a golfer or anyone off the street for that matter.
Yeah. Not to get super in the weeds, but one of the questions I've always kind of
Let's go
had
there.
is, yeah, do you think that everybody can have, around a, so for those that don't know, TPI, at least it used to back in the day, I don't know, I think it still does, has like, it basically gives you like a fitness handicap, right? Can everybody get down to zero, do you think? Or do you think some people, like, maybe if they have, there's obviously outlier cases where people maybe have some kyphosis or whatever else going on that isn't going to allow them, T-spine mobility. To to make it in simplest term possible, can everybody get down into maybe that 0 to 5 range? Or are there some people that, like, no matter how hard they work, no matter how much they put into it, they're just not going to be able to get there?
Yeah, so there's two parts to my answer right away. The first part is, do we want to?
Mm.
Because golf, as we know, is about know thyself, right? I mean, DJ was number one player in the world for a long time, hitting it one direction, and he just made sure he could hit the cut, right? Everyone's seen that one. So obviously, like for some players, we just want consistency of those scores on a day-to-day basis, so that the coach, again, we're talking about higher level at this point.
Yep. Yep.
But we just want consistency so you know what to expect when you get to the course on a day-to-day basis. Everyone leaving treatment room, everyone leaving sort of weight room if they screen out approximately the same every day, there's going to be a higher likelihood that their swing is going to look and feel the same every day. So that's part one. Maybe we do, maybe we don't want to get down to zero. Obviously, like I would love for everyone to be super fit and everyone to be able to do potentially whatever they want. So getting down to that 0 or 5 a handicap on the screen, on the level 1 screen, would be great. So let's get back to your actual question. Is it possible? I like to be an optimist. I like to think anything is possible. But for some people, just based on genetics, it might be tricky. There's going to be people that are built more like gorillas, people that are built more like cheetahs, and it's going to make certain tests harder for some than others. Then you have to add in their medical history, previous injuries, how they've trained in the past. And so sometimes like maybe 0 or 5 might not be truly feasible. But yeah, like if you work and you put the work in, you should be able to inch your way closer and closer to getting a little more fit, a little more mobile, a little more strong. So I guess the answer is almost always it depends, but that's about the best I can do in sort of like a 2-tier kind of answer for you.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for myself because I've spent so much time trying to improve my mobility over the last 8 to 9 months, like we were talking about, and like it has improved. Don't get me wrong. Like whenever I do even things like grape squeezes, I can get my leg up a lot more, or just basic T-spine mobility and stuff like that. But it's just like, man, it feels like I'm freaking working on this thing every day and I'm making barely any improvement. And like I think that is something that can probably discourage a lot of people when it just sort of feels like you're doing, let's say, 2 sets of these 5 to 6 mobility exercises every single day, and it's like it's just micro improvements, and I think that's something that is difficult to deal with as a player sometimes, because you can go in the weight room and feel like you're moving up, or you can make some changes in your swing or your mind or whatever, and you can sort of see the progress. Mobility feels like one of those things, man, where it's just like you just got to do it and hope that it kind of gets better.
Yeah, it's all about traction for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you speak like that, I always wonder, like, maybe there's a missing component of the puzzle as well. Like, maybe there's a stability motor control issue that's not allowing you to be in those positions, right? So, maybe we need to look away from what is perceived as a shoulder external rotation dysfunction. Maybe there's a rib cage issue or a stability issue somewhere else that someone like yourself as a specific would have to like look into. The amount of times I've had someone come in my office with a shoulder dysfunction and their opposite sided foot or ankle is slightly dysfunctional. I mean, I could make a living just on contralateral upper and lower body kind of dysfunctions. But yeah, you're bang on though. You got to stick to it. You got to stick to a plan. And basically what I say to people coming in is like, look, like this isn't like a one and done thing. We're going to test you now. We're going to give you a game plan. You're going to execute it for 6 to 8 weeks. And if you're not executing it exactly as planned for 6 to 8 weeks, then you're not actually executing the plan. So just stay on it, and then we retest. And if it's making some gains, great. But if it's not, then maybe we're missing something, and maybe we have to like add or shift or change. But you're right. I mean, it's like Kobe or Mamba mentality kind of stuff. Like you got to wake up at 4, work on it for 20 minutes, go work on your game, go back to bed, wake up again. I mean, if you want to be a true golf psycho, then that's what you got to do.
Yeah. No, there's certainly validity to that. One of the other big components I'm working on, and I'm sure others, juniors and high-level amateurs, professionals that are listening to this podcast will appreciate it. Ground reaction force, right? So I know that's a thing that you talk a lot about as well. TPI has been putting out some interesting stuff, or they have for a while now, I guess. Maybe I've been living under a rock, around vertical jump and the correlation between vertical jump and peak force outputs and clubhead speed and sort of all those things. So maybe if you could touch a little bit on, general knowledge of ground reaction force and that whole segment as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. So the tech itself is pretty incredible. I'm associated and I use Smart to Move force plates. They're kind of one of the first to market that were a little more mobile, and just the way my practice works, I can kind of take the plates to anywhere they go. For me, that made sense. The force plate itself will measure your lead foot and your trail foot, where on your foot you're pressing and what direction you're pressing into the ground. And so essentially it measures how you're using the ground to develop force. And so there's a lot of different ways to kind of think about how the golf swing is formed, but one thing we know for sure, without ground reaction force, nothing can happen. There may be people have seen, try to swing a golf club standing on a sheet of glare ice. doesn't really happen because you need to be able to manipulate the ground and manipulate your feet in order to produce force. So how this relates to TPI is that you're going to manipulate your feet and you're going to manipulate the ground based on the hardware that your body has at its disposal. So if you have dysfunction somewhere in your body, it's going to choose to use the fascia, the bones, and the muscles in your body in a way to produce force. So you have to kind of look at it multiple angles. Some people think ground forces are more important than your body work. Some people think, the kinematic sequence is more important than ground forces or body work. I sit in the camp of they all need to be looked at. You need to know your sequencing. You need to know what your swing looks like on video. You need to know what your body's doing. And then you need to know what your forces are. So in my practice, I look at forces less as a teaching tool, more as a capture tool. So when someone's swinging great, we capture. And then we have something to go back to when they're not swinging so great. Now, there are times when a beginner comes in, and I work with a few kind of coaches that will pull forces to sort of instruct live on the fly. Okay, we need to be a little more, think a little more towards the target on your trail side. We'll give those verbals, and if, of course, someone has a visual in front of them of what that actually looks like on the force plate with an arrow. But it just gives us actual objective numbers and objective data to say, here's what you're actually doing. And then here's what most tour players do. So is it valuable? Absolutely. It's extremely valuable. And, I think Dr. Rose suggests that if he had one toy, stranded on an island, that would be the toy he would take is his force plates. And I tend to agree because he's assuming that he's bringing his brain, and I'm assuming I'm bringing mine too, with all the trinkets and tricks over the years. But it is a pretty incredible tool. So if anyone has an opportunity to get on force plates and see what's happening, I think it'd be great. We've got some coaches now who strictly look at force plate tech to build golf swings, and I think that's one way to do it. I think the future of golf coaching, though, is including all of this stuff together under one roof. I think that's how you really should be looking at it, because they all interplay with one another. But did you have any specifics around force plate kind of numbers, or did you have specifics around sequencing or?
Yeah, so I don't really have anything in terms of numbers, but we can relate it to what I'm working on in my game at the moment, and people may be able to take it away from it. I'm working on pushing earlier, right? Mm-hmm. So the way I sort of describe it is, if my feet are here, I push laterally this way, I'm bracing, but as I'm sort of, and I'll be curious if this is correct or not, but as I'm sort of getting partway back, I'm already trying to shift this way, and then from the top, I'm trying to shove back, feel like I'm crunching, and then pushing, up and back and out of the way. Is that a pretty accurate sequence? Is there anything that you would sort of add to that?
Yeah, so here's my answer. That sounds like that could be the right thing for you. But unless I have that information in front of me, I don't know. Yeah. This is the part about coaching that's tricky. I could say hippopotamus and it might work for you, right? But anyway, this is me being a nerd, getting into the weeds a little bit. But yes, most people struggle with early. Most people struggle with pushing away from the ball. And so there's a few really great drills that I like to kind of give people just to get the feeling. But so often, once they get it and they see it on a force plate of what early actually is, they're like, holy man, is this ever crazy? And then, so yes, you want to go early lateral into your lead leg, and your lead leg needs to be strong enough to stop that so that you can turn that lateral down the line into a rotational vertical. But of course, you don't want to sway. So it all has to kind of map out together. So then you can see how sequencing of forces is so related to what your body can manage. Because maybe you're a hockey player and you're so used to pushing hard off of your glute. Well, that's going to move you towards the ball. So now, again, it can become a coaching tool. So usually earlier, usually harder is better. And I guess one example I have is I worked with a player who's shot 58 in competition twice, 59 once. This guy was an incredible player. And even him, it was okay, earlier lateral, more vertical. Turns out he was a great spinner. Mm-hmm. But this is where we need to be cautious in the coaching realm. Like, this guy's a stud. Like, who else has shot in the 50s 3 times in their career in tournament? Why am I effing coaching this guy, for lack of a better term? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and what's the reason he's not on the PGA Tour? Why is he trying to get into a Corn Ferry Tour event? So looking for consistencies in that player might be a better thing. But again, let's peel it all the way back. Most of the time, it's like a takeaway. You need to get down the line quicker and stop it. And it's all about timing.
Yeah, I think the stopping it is the interesting part, and also kind of the tough part that can be. And this one is probably so subjective, but a question that I've always had. Let's imagine you had you had 2 players, right? You had a 170-pound player. Let's say these are both males. 170-pound player who is, a reasonable amount stronger than a 200-pound player. Who's going to create more ground force? Let's say they sequence the exact same way. Who creates more ground force? Is it the 200-pound player, or is it the guy who's stronger? Or is it,
we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. We have to measure it.
Yeah.
We have to measure it, right? Because we don't know. And so it's all about directions and sequences and how that relates to how it gets out of the club as well. And again, it might not even matter how much ground force, because if it's out of sequence, then that doesn't matter either. And so this is where it's like you kind of gotta look at the whole thing and understand the whole thing. Just standing there, of course, a 200-pound person is going to produce more force. And likewise, the earth is pushing as hard as back into them. Yeah, the answer is we don't know. That's it. We don't know. We have to measure it. But I think what you're saying is really fascinating, even with the previous question as well, because for someone, say, that's a pretty good player, even like a tour level player that slightly early extends, right, moves towards the ball, or struggles with AP force, right, rotation. I'll even go as far as posing the question: do they have the right equipment? Because when you begin to swing that club is also pulling on you. So if we look at a lighter club or a heavier club with that player, could that change their sequence? Or could that activate a different set of muscles or fascial system to fire in a different way? And you would think maybe a lighter club would work better for that player, that they can actually swing that lighter club. Maybe it's a swing weight versus an overall weight thing. Right? So without testing it, though, we don't know. And this is another side gripe that I have, is that a lot of what goes into club fitting, for the most part, is like try this, and oftentimes based on the club fitter's previous knowledge. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not poo-pooing on club fitters out there. Everyone's got a different way of doing it, but so often it's just based on like their hunch. And I don't know about you, but in my day-to-day job as a physio, if I did everything based on hunches, I'd be right a lot. Like, I feel comfortable with that, but there's going to be days where I'm not right. And then maybe they go a whole career playing X100s, and that's not what they should be playing. Shout out X100, great shaft.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, is someone who has changed shafts this winter based on a hunch, personal hunch. That's really an interesting one. I mean, it's actually worked out well, but that's an interesting one to even think about how that would then affect early extension, because it's the same thing, right? Like, I'm so focused on the software, like I always have been, of like, all right, well, I just have to push harder and like get back more, and I have to work on my mobility, and like that's what's gonna resolve this thing, and maybe it will. But that's sort of a really interesting thought for someone out there. I guess the problem is a lot of people then don't have access to those resources to be able to toy around with those, to get to be able to get the most out of what they're doing. Like, even some fringe mini tour low level Corn Ferry guys may not even have access to that stuff. So it's an interesting thought, though. I'd never even considered it.
Yeah, for sure. And well, so I try to think of, when I see a player, I try to think of the club as sort of an extension, and them being at one, because it's kind of like a dance partner thing, where they're like I've personified the club now. We do talk nice to them sometimes, but it's an extension of you, and you have to dance well together. So if your kick point, or like I said, your sole design on an iron is off, if your lie angle is maybe not quite right, you're going to have inconsistencies in the system. And your brain is brilliant. It knows how to pick up on this. So obviously you have to get your body right, and you have to understand how to use it with forces, right? And the software. But the software has got workarounds constantly, whether it's a body or like a shoulder dysfunction, or if the equipment doesn't quite match up perfectly. And I mean, I'll just plug it because I represent the brand in Canada here with Ford Golf. I think what they've done is created a regimented fitting process that kind of eliminates the guesswork, where you test all the variables of an iron, and it's all independent, it's all blacked out, and then at the end of it you get a script. Now you can go and build one 7-iron with that and compare, and then there's no pressure to like buy. It's no longer a sales session, it's truly a fitting session, and then you can see what your body likes. Now there's always weaknesses. The weakness is that's just how you're hitting it that day.
Right.
And we already talked about you could wake up tomorrow and feel totally different. So yeah, it's a constant progression to find greatness with the game, whether it's clubs, whether it's, forces, or your body. You have to just sort of keep going. Don't neglect your superpower, but definitely work on weaknesses.
Yeah, that's Dr. Rose is always talking about that, isn't he? Where it's like figure out what your superpower is and hammer it.
Yeah, at my clinic I'm a little less. I think I'm a little less formal. I say, "Do you, bro?"
Yeah, that's true though.
Who are you? Who are you?
This podcast kind of started out as with the title of "What's the Difference," right? So why do some people make it at the highest levels? Professional golf, maybe elite amateur, whatever, and why do others not? And maybe that's your take on it, right? Is you have to do what makes you you. I don't know if you have any other takes on that, but I think there's a lot of validity to that, whether that's from a mental side of things, performance side of things, whatever. Like I think for me personally, it's taken me a long time to realize that my driver and my putter are my strengths, and I've just spent so much time trying to work on the other areas, and they do incrementally improve, but I've found that my driver and putter then will get worse, and then the other stuff still isn't that good, so then it's like you just end up playing worse, and it's like, all right, well, like what are we doing here? Like you're not really improving at that point.
And your brain is also not used to playing that way, right?
Yeah.
So if you sort of slightly flip a bit on the pie chart, like the chart of your skills, if you flip it a little bit, you're now uncomfortable, right? Because it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not used to playing from the left rough, 3 more times in a round.
Right. Yeah.
That's a weird thing.
It is.
Yeah. And then some players like Bubba made a living of like driving it all over the place and getting up and down from anywhere and sinking some putts, right? I mean, there's so many ways to do this. And I think like a lot of the greats, and granted, like I'm no historian and I'm not like, in the instruction field, but the friends of mine that are and colleagues of mine that are will say like all the greats just knew their game better than anybody else. And there's only a couple of people that had all the tools all the time. Right. So, usually you can do really well and continue to get better if you know yourself. And I mean, I've got great examples of extremely good players, like tour level players or tour players that, have gone chasing things. It's kind of got them a little bit crooked, not literally, but also literally. And then again, I've got one younger up and coming player who has every business being there, but we get through all my physical screens, force plates, club fit, everything's pretty in the pocket, but we get down to a visualization test and I put the pressure on emotionally for him and all of a sudden nothing's working. So, okay, so maybe this is less of a physical and this is a sports psych thing. Maybe we need to take a step back and sort of visualize, or maybe you need to get into like childhood trauma stuff. Like who knows, right? Like, because you can't just say golf is just strictly like physical. It's everything.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of people will probably appreciate out there, and something that I have certainly struggled with myself is thinking that you can systematize it and then thinking that you can have it be all physical. Like, for those who've been following a few of the events that I've played lately, like, I was down in Arizona a week before the Waste Management playing a mini tour event, and then stayed down there. And I think maybe I shot one over as my highest score, but then I shot 79.82 in the event. And so it's like, okay, like you're shooting, a few under every time you tee it up in money games and whatever. It's not like they're nothing. And then you go in an event and you feel like you can't hit a golf ball. It's like, okay, well, clearly your physical skills haven't changed that much. Like what's going on? And so it's not kind of an interesting one to have started to dive into that. But I think it's the one that people don't want to dive into. At least for me personally, like it's a lot easier to have a pretty golf swing that I can post on Instagram than it is to figure out why my brain doesn't want to work in an event.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier, You
gotta kind of try to gamify that too.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so many layers, and then behind that layer, there's probably another one.
100%.
So, but all the while making sure you hold on to your superpowers.
Exactly.
Right? So again, it would be a fascinating conversation. And again, I'm not like a clinical psychologist, or I'm not in sports psych, but I often do chat with my players about having the ability to at least recognize when there's a shift in a round, so that you can start working toward just recognizing it and accepting that it's happening. Right? So some people can just see a line on a putt for 12 holes in a row, and then all of a sudden they have no vision, and then it messes with stroke, something. So recognizing that change is happening, and then eventually finding ways to sort of reset, finding ways in the round to reset, whatever that is. Like, are you someone who plays hot, or are you someone that plays cool? And then trying to find that sweet spot. The zone is kind of like what they say with Tiger, right? Like, where is your zone? But first you have to recognize that you actually have those moments, right?
Yeah, it's really funny you bring that up, because I was just texting my performance coach about that yesterday. Because I mean seriously, it's exactly what you described, where it's like you play for 10 or 12 holes, and then it's like I can't see a shot. Like I genuinely cannot see it. Like it's, no matter how much I try and slow down, whatever, it's like it's not there. So like it's funny, because that'll be one of the things that I'll be posting about is trying to navigate that, because it's, for me personally, like that's something that it makes no sense. It's like, you just stop being able to see a shot for some reason. So it's like trying to dive into why. Is it a fueling thing even, right? Like is it, are you not getting enough carbohydrates? Like there's just so many variables that, I've, it's like you mentioned with the onion, like I feel like the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, join the club, but
yeah.
I'd be interested to hear, like your journey with that, right? Because you're right, it might be fueling, but being able to recognize it allows you the opportunity that in that moment you don't need to execute until you're ready, right? If you're talking about higher stakes stuff, you don't need to execute until you're ready, right? If you're not on the clock, there's, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of playing fast, but the trigger does not get pulled until you're ready, right? Because every shot, or every decimal of a shot matters, right? We're not even, it could be a micro pull that's to 12 feet instead of 6.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you're making a 6-footer a lot of the time. You're not making that 12-footer a lot of the time. So like that, it's decimal points here and there, but recognizing when you're not ready and allowing yourself the ability to sort of like quickly understand why you're not ready, so that you can get ready and then execute. To me, potentially more than all the physical stuff, this is what really matters, right? And it's what differentiates the best. I mean, I'm sure you watched yesterday. There's tons of examples of that all day yesterday. Granted, I am not a pro. I don't know what it's like to play at that level. The wind was blowing like crazy on a nasty golf course yesterday. But someone did it.
I reposted... It's funny because it's another thing that I'm working on, but the inner dialogue that Cam Young had yesterday on 18, I'm sure you've seen this video where he was talking about, he said, I'm gonna just hit the best shot of my life. Like that was the dialogue that he was telling to himself. That doesn't just happen though. Like that doesn't just happen. Like that's so many years of work and programming, whereas I'd be curious to see the inner dialogue of another unbelievably talented player, which is Ludwig, right? What was going on through Ludwig's mind when he hit those 2 toe balls partway through the back 9?
Yeah, man. Or Thorn Bjornsson like a few holes earlier. Like any player could have won. And then if and when you're making a mistake, where is that happening to, right? So like, I mean, we all know this stuff, missing in the right spots, et cetera, et cetera. But none of those things happen with physical issues.
Yeah.
None of them.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think Cam Young, I mean, his coming out party, if you say, was like the Ryder Cup, he was, in my opinion, the best player there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And he's going to win a lot more. I love that he was so candid about like that 8-inch finishing putt, because you could see it. It took him a long time.
Yeah.
But also, the juxtaposition of how well he executed for the rest of the day on a day that was clearly really tough is a testament, because, again, from a physical standpoint, he's always been a player for the last few years that could win on any given weekend. Like, he's gifted.
Yeah.
But this is the big one. And then this. It's all about how you need things to be consistent. It always comes back to, it needs to all add up to this relatively the same thing more often than not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I want to be cognizant of your time here, so I want to just ask one more question. But in the players that you've worked with or seen, on the topic of Cam Young, one of the longest players out there, that was the longest drive in the ShotLink era, I believe, on 18. What do you see in the players that move it the fastest? I'm someone who, like, when I graduated college, I think I swung it 105, and I swing it maybe 116 now. Like, I'd like to swing it in the low 20s, but, like, man, it's been a grind just to get up to even where I'm at now. Do you think some of it's natural? Is a lot of it, just learning how to sequence better? Like, what's the secret sauce behind Clubhead Speed?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of everything. So number one, you have to be athletic and you have to learn how to move quickly when you're young. So this is common all over the internet. Like, everyone knows you have to be a multi-sport athlete of some kind. You have to have connective tissue reliability. So you have to be strong enough to be able to sustain repetitions over and over and over and over again. You're born with some of that, but you have to work into that. So building reps over time of building speed. So it starts when you're young. And then sequencing, I think, when you're talking about the differences at the highest levels, I think better sequencing is more efficient. Efficiency is going to win more often than not. But it doesn't hurt to be big. If I got a 16, 17-year-old who's just starting to really kind of finish growing or getting through his growth spurt, and he's fast, I'm like, okay, let's put a little mass on you, man, and so that you can be this for a long time. It's always interdependent, but sequencing, I would say, is the most important thing, because it's just efficiency for sure. The cool part with Clubhead Speed is that it is the most important determinant of how hard or how far you can hit a ball. Excuse me. So speed is the most important component for how far you hit the ball, but mass of you and mass of the club is also important to create impulse. So again, I don't know the exacts on this, but I think Bryson and Rory have similar sort of all-out tournament swings as far as speed goes. But if I think you take the equipment and the size of Bryson versus Rory, there's going to be a difference there, and so there's a little more impulse, and that might be just the difference in a the few yards that Bryson gets. Granted, when Bryson lines up and swings it as hard as possible, it's a different bird.
Yeah.
But efficiency wins.
What he did was pretty insane. I mean, I've always sort of had questions around, if I were to a heavier weights or, were to continue to gain, because I'm 6 foot tall, I weigh 170 pounds. I'm like, if I could be $185 as lean as I am now, and mobile, I'd probably hit it a bit further. But then it's well, maybe not, right? So it's kind of one of those, like you mentioned, it depends questions. Completely. Yeah, I think you and I could probably go on all day for this, but I want to be cognizant of your time. I just want to give you the chance as well to shout out any sponsors, partners, where people can find you, how people can work with you, etc.
Yeah, you bet. So I do online work. We've got packages set up to do kind of, internet TPI stuff. I do coaching with PGA professionals as well. So if there's coaches out there that want to do some joint work together, happy to do that. Instagram is probably the easiest way to get me. I'm Potts Physio on there. I'm based out of Vancouver, but I do fly to see a clientele from time to time. And yeah, so that's probably the easiest way. I'm a gamer, so it's not abnormal for me to be on the phone with a non-paying customer, so to speak, for an hour at a time here and there, just because I'm into this. So and just like some of the people that watch your podcast, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. So yeah, happy to chat anytime.
100% appreciate it, and thanks for the conversation today, man. I think a lot of people will take some good things away from that.
You bet. Thanks, buddy.
Cool.